Sometimes a single act of kindness can change not just one life, but the lives of everyone around you. Emma worked at the small-town diner from early morning until late at night, 6 days a week. She was only in her early 20s, but life had already taught her to grow up faster than most people her age. Every morning, she tied her hair back, put on her apron, and reminded herself that she was working not just for herself but also for the 2 younger siblings waiting for her at home. Their parents had passed away years earlier, leaving Emma to run the house, pay the bills, and make sure her siblings lived a normal life. Even though she carried so much responsibility, Emma never showed it on her face. She always greeted customers with a warm smile, even when she was tired or worried about money. Regular customers loved her because she remembered their orders, listened to their stories, and made everyone feel like they mattered. She wasn't just a waitress. To many people, she was the heart of the diner. The diner itself was old but cozy, with red booths, flickering neon lights, and the smell of pancakes always in the air. It wasn't a fancy place, but it was the kind where people felt comfortable. Truck drivers came in early in the morning, families stopped by after school, and older folks came in just to have someone to talk to. Emma managed all types of customers with the same gentle patience. On one particular afternoon, the diner was especially crowded. Kids were running around. Coffee cups kept emptying faster than Emma could refill them, and the cooks in the kitchen were shouting orders at each other. Emma moved from table to table with practiced speed, her notepad in one hand and plates balanced in the other. Sweat clung to her forehead, but she didn't slow down. She couldn't afford to. Every shift mattered, every tip mattered, every smile mattered, as she delivered a tray of burgers to a family near the window. The front door opened, and a quiet hush fell just for a moment. A man walked in, tall and well-dressed, with tired eyes. Beside him was a wheelchair, occupied by a teenage boy with soft features and an expression that seemed both curious and shy. The boy's hands shook slightly, and his head tilted as if sitting upright took effort. Emma noticed them immediately. She always noticed people who seemed lost, uncomfortable, or unsure. She walked over with her typical bright smile, even though inside she felt a small ache of sympathy. The boy looked like he needed extra care. The man beside him looked like he carried a heavy weight on his shoulders. "Hello?" Emma said softly, kneeling down so she could be at eye level with the boy. "My name is Emma. How are you doing today?" The boy's eyes lit up a little. He didn't speak, but he gave a small, crooked smile. His father nodded politely, though his expression stayed serious. Even guarded, Emma guided them to a booth where the boy's wheelchair could fit comfortably. She brought menus, but she didn't rush them the way she sometimes had to rush other customers. Something about the pair made her slow down and speak gently. The father ordered a simple meal, something small, while asking for something soft and easy for his son to eat. Emma nodded, understanding immediately. She had seen customers with different challenges before, and she knew how important it was to make them feel respected, not pitied. While waiting for the food, Emma watched quietly from behind the counter. She noticed the father struggling to balance a phone call while trying to help his son sit comfortably. He looked overwhelmed, like someone who wanted to be everywhere at once and could never quite manage. The boy, on the other hand, sat patiently, looking around the diner with wide, curious eyes. The moment struck Emma deeply. She didn't know who the man was or what his story might be. She didn't know how much money he had or what kind of job he worked. All she saw was a father doing his best and a boy trying to enjoy a simple meal out in the world. When the food arrived, Emma placed the plates gently on the table. The boy tried to lift his fork, but his hands trembled too much. The father immediately ended his phone call and leaned forward to help. But he was clearly struggling, not because he didn't care, but because he was tired, distracted, and pulled in too many directions at once. Emma hesitated for only a moment. She didn't want to intrude, but she also couldn't stand aside and watch them struggle. Slowly, she stepped forward and said in a quiet, respectful voice, "If you'd like, I can help." The father looked up, surprised. Most people stared at them or avoided eye contact. Few people offered help without making the situation awkward. But Emma's expression held no judgment, no pity, just kindness. He nodded, almost relieved. Emma pulled up a chair beside the boy and gently fed him small bites of mashed potatoes. She talked to him softly, asking simple questions, and even though he couldn't answer in words, he responded with smiles and small sounds of happiness. Other customers noticed, but Emma didn't care. To her, this wasn't a big heroic act. It was simply what any decent person should do when faced with someone who needed help. The father watched silently. His eyes softened as he observed how naturally Emma connected with his son. No hesitation, no fear, no impatience. She saw the boy not as a burden, but as a human being, deserving the same care and attention as anyone else. For Emma, it was just another moment in her long, difficult day. She didn't realize that her simple act of kindness would soon change the direction of her life. She didn't know that the man watching her was someone whose decisions could change the world. She didn't know that her name would soon mean something far greater than just the waitress at the diner. All she knew at that moment was that helping someone felt right. And sometimes, the simplest right actions are the ones that echo the loudest in someone else's life. Alexander Hale had spent years building an empire, but lately he felt more like a tired father than a powerful businessman. He rarely visited small places like this diner, but today he had no choice. His son Liam had insisted on leaving the house. Alexander wanted to give him a normal afternoon. Even if balancing work and fatherhood felt harder every day, he sat across from Liam, trying to cut the food into small pieces while answering non-stop calls from his office. His company was dealing with a crisis and everyone needed him at the same time. He put his phone between his shoulder and ear, trying to help Liam lift a spoon, but Liam's hand shook too much. Food slipped, falling back on the plate, and Liam's face tightened with frustration. Alexander hated seeing that look. It reminded him how unfair life had been to his son. He wanted to help, but he was only one person. He tried to keep calm, but juggling so many responsibilities made his chest feel heavy. Just then, Emma walked toward them again. She had been watching from a distance. Understanding the situation without making it obvious, she saw the way Alexander's jaw tightened, the way he sighed quietly, the way he kept wiping food off Liam's shirt with gentle hands. She saw the love, the exhaustion, the helplessness. When she reached the table, she spoke softly. "I can help, if that's okay." Alexander froze. Most people offered help only to stare or whisper. Some acted uncomfortable around Liam. Some made Alexander feel like he wasn't doing enough for his own son. But Emma didn't seem like that. She looked at Liam with warmth, not pity. She looked at Alexander with respect, not judgment. He nodded slowly. "If you don't mind," Emma smiled and pulled a chair beside Liam. She didn't rush. She didn't act like she was doing something heroic. She acted like this was normal, something she had done 1,000 times. She gently lifted a spoonful of mashed potatoes and said, "Ready, buddy?" Liam smiled instantly. That smile hit Alexander like a quiet shock. His son didn't smile like that with strangers. He didn't trust easily. But here he was, grinning at this waitress as if she were a long-lost friend. Emma fed him one small bite at a time, chatting with him in a calm and cheerful voice. She asked him what he liked, even though he couldn't answer with words. She laughed softly when he made happy sounds. She wiped his chin gently. She stayed patient even when food dropped, or when Liam moved unexpectedly to her. It seemed natural. But to Alexander, it was rare, almost unbelievable. The diner buzzed with people. But Emma made Liam feel like the only person in the room. Her kindness was quiet, but powerful. Alexander couldn't stop watching. He saw that she wasn't pretending. She wasn't acting polite because she wanted tips. She was genuinely caring, the way a big sister cares for her siblings, the way a mother cares for her child. For the first time all day, Alexander lowered his phone and switched it to silent. That small act surprised even him. Work could wait. This moment mattered more. As he watched Emma feed Liam, a strange feeling formed in his chest. It wasn't attraction. It wasn't pity. It was something more like gratitude mixed with wonder. When was the last time someone helped them without making them feel uncomfortable? When was the last time Liam had someone new smile at him like that? Emma didn't talk about Liam's disability. She didn't ask personal questions. She didn't look uncomfortable. She treated him like a normal boy who simply needed a little help. Liam's face glowed with joy. He made soft noises as if telling a story, and Emma listened seriously, nodding and responding as if she understood every sound. Alexander felt his eyes sting with emotion he hadn't expected. Watching his son so happy was a gift he rarely got. And the strangest thing was that Emma didn't rush back to work, even though the diner was busy. But she wasn't ignoring her job either. When customers called her name, she smiled and said she'd be just a minute. No one seemed upset because everyone in the diner could see what she was doing at one point. A customer whispered, "That girl has a good heart." Another nodded. "She always has." Alexander heard these whispers, and they echoed inside him. He had met countless people in his life, business partners, investors, workers, politicians. Many of them pretended to care when they wanted something. But this girl, she cared without expecting anything in return. When Liam began to laugh at one of Emma's silly jokes, Alexander felt something shift inside him. It was as if he had been walking in fog for years, and now he could see clearly. He realized how lonely they had been, how difficult it was to meet someone who didn't judge, how rare it was for someone to treat Liam like he deserved kindness, not sympathy. For the first time in a long time, Alexander felt hope. Emma eventually stood up, wiping her hands on her apron. "You're all set," she told Liam with a big smile. "You ate so well?" Liam clapped his hands, delighted. Alexander smiled too, a real smile, the kind he hadn't felt in a long while, before she walked away. Emma looked at Alexander kindly and said, "You're doing a great job with him. He's a wonderful kid." Simple words, but they hit Alexander like a warm wave. No one ever said that to him. Most people saw his son as a challenge, not a blessing. Hearing someone appreciate his child felt like a small miracle. After she walked away, Alexander sat there quietly, watching her move around the diner again. For the rest of the meal, Liam kept glancing at Emma, following her with his eyes. Every time she looked back and smiled, he lit up. Everything changed in that single afternoon. Something in Alexander's heart softened. Something in his mind awakened. Something in his future shifted direction. He didn't know it yet. But this moment, this simple act of kindness from a waitress, it was going to change all of their lives forever. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was gentle, like a soft spark. But sometimes, even a small spark can light up an entire life. Alexander returned to the diner a few days later, though even he wasn't fully sure why. He told his office he needed a quiet place to work, but deep down he knew the real reason. Something about the small diner, the warmth inside it, and especially the way Emma treated his son, had stayed with him. It felt strange, almost unusual, to want to return to a place simply because someone had shown kindness there. When he pushed open the door, the familiar bell chimed, and the smell of fresh coffee filled the air. Liam sat in his wheelchair beside him, looking around excitedly. He remembered this place. He remembered Emma. His eyes searched the room immediately, hoping to find her. And there she was, moving between tables with her usual bright smile, balancing plates effortlessly as she chatted with customers. When she noticed them, her face lit up just a little more. She waved at Liam, who waved back in his own shy, wobbly way. That small exchange warmed Alexander's heart. He chose a table close to the window again. And Emma walked over with the same cheerful energy as before. "Nice to see you both again," she said. She didn't make it sound like a formal greeting. It sounded honest, as if she really meant it. Alexander nodded politely, but his eyes followed her as she left to get menus. He noticed something he hadn't paid attention to last time, the way people looked at her with affection. The old couple near the corner smiled whenever she passed. The teenagers at another table joked with her like she was their big sister. Even the cooks in the kitchen shouted her name, friendly teasing. She really was the heart of the diner. Liam watched her too. Every time she approached, he made soft, happy sounds. Emma responded to him every time, touching his hand gently or telling him a new joke that made him giggle. Over the next few weeks, something became a pattern, Alexander, and Liam began visiting the diner more often. sometimes twice a week, sometimes more. Alexander told himself it was just because Liam enjoyed it, but he knew there was something else pulling him back. Each visit gave him more chances to observe. Emma. He saw how she comforted a crying child by giving him a free cookie and telling a silly story. He saw how she helped an elderly man cut his food because his hands trembled too. He saw how she stood by the counter, listening patiently to a lonely widow who had no one else to talk to. Emma didn't judge, didn't rush, didn't pretend. She gave people attention, like she had all the time in the world, even though she clearly didn't. Alexander couldn't help wondering how someone who likely faced her own problems could still be so kind to others. He never asked her about her life, though. He didn't want to make her uncomfortable. Instead, he just listened when she talked. She sometimes mentioned silly things about her siblings or joked about how the coffee machine hated her. She never complained about her struggles, even when she had reason to. But Alexander saw the tiredness in her eyes sometimes. He noticed how she massaged her wrist after long hours, how she took a deep breath every time she finished dealing with a difficult customer, how she stood on her feet without resting for hours. It made him respect her even more. The more he observed her, the more he admired her. He also noticed how differently she treated Liam. Most people spoke to him like he was a baby or avoided looking at him at all. Emma did neither. She treated him exactly the way she treated everyone else, with respect and friendliness. Liam loved her for that. He wasn't used to strangers accepting him quickly, but Emma did, and that made her special in his world. One afternoon, as Liam ate his soft meal with Emma's help, Alexander watched the two of them interact. Emma made little stories about each bite. "Look, this potato traveled all the way from Potato Land just to meet you," and Liam laughed out loud, something he rarely did at home. Alexander sat quietly, taking in the moment. The business calls could wait. The emails could wait. His son's happiness was more important. He found himself thinking about how lonely their life had been. Despite all his wealth and success, he couldn't protect Liam from the world's harshness. People stared at his son. Some whispered. Others looked away. It hurt him more than he admitted, but in this diner, everything was different. Here Liam was just another boy enjoying his meal. Here people smiled at him. Here he wasn't judged or pitied. And the biggest reason for that was Emma. Alexander started noticing something else, the peace he felt around her. Her presence brought a warmth to the cold parts of his life that money could never touch. She wasn't trying to impress him, and she didn't know who he really was. She simply cared. That sincerity was priceless. Emma began to understand Liam better with each visit. She learned the meaning of his different sounds. One meant he was excited. One meant he was hungry. Another meant he wanted to hear another joke. She also learned that he liked apple juice more than orange juice, and that he giggled every time someone used silly voices. She learned these things naturally, without being told, because she actually paid attention. Alexander found himself relaxing more around her. Sometimes they chatted lightly about the weather or the town. Sometimes they talked about nothing at all. But even those small conversations felt comforting. He couldn't help wondering about her life outside the diner. Why someone so young worked such long hours. What dreams she had. What worries she carried. But he never pushed. She would tell him in her own time if she wanted to. As the days passed, people at the diner noticed the trio. Some teased Emma gently. "Your favorite customers are here again?" And she would laugh, brushing it off. But Alexander felt something deeper, growing, something he didn't fully understand yet. He wasn't falling in love. It wasn't that simple. It was more like he was rediscovering something he had lost long ago: trust in people. Emma didn't know the impact she was having. She didn't know that her smallest gestures were touching the life of a man who made decisions worth billions. She didn't know her kindness was rebuilding something inside him that had been broken for years. To her, she was just helping a father and his son. To Alexander, she was changing the way he saw the world. Little did she know, her genuine heart was about to take her into a life she never imagined, a life that was already shifting around her without her even noticing. In the weeks that followed, the diner's atmosphere began to change, but not in a way anyone could see immediately. It was small things at first: whispers between the staff, worried looks from the owner, fewer customers than usual. Emma noticed all of it, but she didn't have time to think deeply about it. She had rent to pay, siblings to feed, and a life that didn't allow space for panic. Still, every time she walked past the owner's office and saw him sitting with his head in his hands, a cold fear twisted in her stomach. One night, after the last customer left, she finally gathered the courage to ask him what was wrong. He hesitated at first, then sighed heavily and told her the truth. The diner was running out of money. Bills had piled up, repairs were too expensive, and the landlord was raising the rent. If nothing changed soon, they would have to shut down. The news hit Emma harder than she expected. This diner wasn't just a job, it was her lifeline. Without it, she didn't know how she would take care of her siblings. She tried to stay strong, but her mind raced with worry. She didn't sleep much that night, despite her fears. The next day, she came to work with a smile, pretending everything was normal. She didn't want the customers to feel the heaviness she carried inside. She didn't want Liam or Alexander to sense anything was wrong. She didn't want to make anyone worry about her, but Alexander noticed. He always noticed subtle things about her. It's the way she forced a smile, the way she rubbed her temples when she thought no one was looking, the way her shoulders slumped when she thought she was alone. This time, her stress was clearly heavier than before. When he returned to the diner that afternoon with Liam, he saw Emma moving around with her usual warmth, but her eyes looked tired and sad. Even Liam sensed the change. When she came to feed him, he kept touching her hand. As if trying to comfort her, after Emma walked away to serve another table, Alexander turned to the diner owner, who was wiping the counter with a distracted, defeated expression. A short conversation was enough for Alexander to understand exactly what was happening. The diner was drowning in debt. Repairs were overdue. Staff might lose their jobs. And Emma, the girl who had shown his son kindness no one else had, was about to lose everything. Alexander sat back down, deep in thought, watching Emma with a new kind of seriousness. She had no idea who he really was. She didn't know that the man sitting quietly in her section controlled companies, investments, and resources that could change her entire life overnight. She only saw him as a tired father trying hard for his son. To Alexander, that made her kindness even more genuine. He didn't reveal the truth to her immediately. He didn't want to overwhelm her or make her treat him differently. He wanted to understand her without the influence of his identity or wealth. But now, seeing her life about to fall apart, he knew he couldn't stay silent anymore. A few days later, he arrived at the diner early in the morning. This time, he didn't come alone. 2 black cars parked outside, and a security team accompanied him inside. The bell over the door chimed, but instead of the usual quiet greeting, the diner fell completely silent. Customers whispered. Staff froze. Everyone stared. Emma walked out of the kitchen, confused by the sudden stillness. When she saw the suited guards, and then Alexander standing among them, her breath caught. But she didn't panic. Her first instinct was to look for Liam. Once she saw him safe in his wheelchair beside Alexander, her shoulders relaxed. What she didn't understand was why the whole place felt different, why people were staring, why phones were being subtly raised to take photos. Alexander approached her slowly, seeing the confusion in her eyes. This was the moment he had been delaying, the moment he had to stop hiding who he was. Emma, he said softly, there's something I need to tell you. She waited, still puzzled. Still unaware of the truth about to unfold. I'm not just a father, he continued gently. I'm Alexander Hale. The name hit the room like a shockwave. People gasped. Someone dropped a spoon. Even the owner took a step back in disbelief. Alexander Hale, the billionaire CEO, whose face appeared in magazines, business news, and international events. A man people talked about but never expected to meet in a small-town diner. Emma blinked, stunned, unsure how to respond. Her heart pounded. She didn't know what to say or how to act. Before she could even form a word, Alexander continued. I wanted to tell you sooner, I said, but I didn't want you to treat me differently. You and Liam formed a connection naturally. That meant more to me than I can explain. She swallowed hard, still speechless. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "And I know about the diner. The financial trouble." Her eyes widened in embarrassment and worry. She didn't want pity, especially not from a billionaire. But Alexander didn't look at her with pity. He looked at her with respect. "You've helped my son in ways no one else ever has," he said. "You gave him joy. You gave him comfort. You gave him kindness without asking for anything in return." Emma's eyes welled with tears, but she blinked them away quickly. "And because of that," Alexander said gently, "I want to help you now," before she could protest. He explained that he had already paid off the diner's debts. Repairs would start soon. The diner would not close. Every staff member would keep their job. The owner stood in shock, tears filling his eyes as he realized his life's work had been saved. Emma stood frozen, able to believe what she was hearing. When she finally found her voice, it trembled. "Why? Why would you do all that?" Alexander looked at her, his expression soft and sincere. "Because kindness like yours," he said, "is rare. And because you changed my son's life, you changed mine too?" Emma felt a wave of emotions, relief, gratitude, shock, confusion. She had no idea her small, everyday kindness could lead to something so big. So life-changing, she had helped a father and his son, because it was the right thing to do. She never expected the truth behind the man she helped, and she definitely never expected that kindness to open a door to a future she hadn't even dared to dream about. Emma could hardly believe the changes happening in her life. Just a few days ago, she'd been worrying about how she would pay the rent, how she would keep the diner open, and how she would support her siblings. Now, thanks to Alexander, all those fears had disappeared. The diner was no longer under threat of closing. Repairs had already begun, and every staff member would keep their jobs. But the real change was much bigger than just money. It was the way her life had shifted completely because of her kindness. Alexander had kept his promise to remain discreet about his identity with the public, but privately, he made sure everything was taken care of. Emma noticed the small upgrades around the diner. The kitchen equipment was modernized, floors were polished, and new chairs and booths replaced the old, worn-out ones. It was still the same cozy diner she loved, but now it felt brighter, cleaner, and full of hope. For Emma, the changes were incredible, but she still treated everyone the same. She smiled at customers, helped them with patience, and worked tirelessly, unaware that she was now part of a story bigger than she had ever imagined. One afternoon, Alexander invited Emma and Liam to visit him outside of the diner. She hesitated at first, unsure of what to expect. She didn't want special treatment or charity, but Alexander assured her it wasn't like that. He only wanted to show her something important. Curious, she agreed, taking Liam with her in his wheelchair. When they arrived, she saw a large building filled with activity, offices, and people she had never met before. Alexander introduced her to the staff, and she noticed something that made her heart warm. This was a foundation for families with disabled children. Children who struggled with everyday tasks, parents who felt overwhelmed, siblings who felt left out. It was a place that provided resources, support, guidance, a place where families could feel hope and encouragement. Emma's eyes filled with tears. She had never imagined she would see something like this, and yet here she was. Alexander smiled at her, noticing her reaction. "I wanted you to see this," he said gently. "I couldn't stop thinking about how you helped Liam. You treated him like a person, not a problem. You didn't judge him, and you didn't expect anything in return. That's why I wanted you to be part of this." Yeah? He offered her a position to help manage the foundation, to bring her own experiences, insights, and heart to families who needed it most. Emma's mind spun. She had only been a waitress, living paycheck to paycheck, working hard to keep her family afloat. Now she was being offered a chance to lead something meaningful on a larger scale. She wanted to say no, unsure if she deserved this, but Alexander's calm, encouraging voice convinced her that she did. "You've already proven you can make a difference," he said. "This is just a bigger place to do it." Emma accepted, and her life changed dramatically. She began working at the foundation, meeting families who reminded her of herself, her siblings, and Liam. She organized events, helped with therapy programs, and even spoke to parents about small ways they could make their children's lives better. Her heart swelled with pride and joy at every success. The work was exhausting, yes, but it was fulfilling in a way that waiting tables never had been. She realized that her small acts of kindness had always mattered. They had prepared her for this moment. Meanwhile, Liam thrived as well. He loved seeing his mother figure in action, helping other children, and interacting with families who reminded him of himself. Alexander watched them both with gratitude, realizing that he had found more than just help for his son. He had found people whose hearts were rare, genuine, and full of compassion. Emma's presence at the foundation became a constant reminder of how much kindness could change a life, not just in small moments, but in large, lasting ways. Emma also continued to visit the diner, though now her role had expanded. She sometimes came to mentor young staff members, teach them patience, kindness, and the importance of empathy. The diner, once just a job for her, became a symbol of hope for the community and for her own family. She even found herself thinking about her siblings differently. Realizing she could inspire them just as she inspired others, Alexander and Emma's bond deepened over time. Though it was built on respect, trust, and shared experiences, rather than any expectation of friendship or romance. Alexander admired her courage, patience, and heart, while Emma respected him not for his wealth, but for his humility and dedication to his son and others. Together, they formed a team in the foundation, proving that two people from very different worlds could work together to make a real difference. As the foundation grew, Emma often reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the first day she had fed Liam, how small and ordinary it had seemed at the time. She had simply wanted to help a boy enjoy his meal. She had never imagined that one act of kindness could lead to saving a diner, changing her career, impacting countless families, and reshaping her entire life. The story of Emma, Liam, and Alexander became known quietly among the foundation's members. Parents shared it with their children as an example of how compassion and patience could create change. Staff members referred to it as a reminder that the smallest gestures often have the biggest impact. And Emma herself never forgot the lesson: genuine kindness, no matter how small, never goes unnoticed. The diner continued to thrive. The foundation expanded, and Emma grew into her new role with grace and dedication. She learned to navigate challenges, solve problems creatively, and mentor others with empathy. Life was no longer a constant struggle for survival. It had become a life of purpose, joy, and hope. Every time she looked at Liam smiling, or watched another child at the foundation thrive, she remembered that first afternoon at the diner. One small choice to help a boy eat his meal had set off a chain of events that transformed her life and the lives of those around her. Alexander often observed her with admiration. Quietly grateful that his son had found a friend and a guide in her, Emma's story proved that life could change in an instant. But only if someone had the courage to act with compassion. Her kindness had not only touched Alexander and Liam, it had rippled outward, creating opportunities, inspiring others, and showing that one person's good heart could alter the course of many lives. She had started as a waitress, exhausted and unsure about her future. She became a leader, a mentor, and a source of hope. And it all began with a simple, selfless act. Her journey showed that when kindness meets opportunity, it can truly change everything. By the time the foundation opened its newest branch, Emma stood beside Alexander and Liam, watching families arrive. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment she had never known before. She realized that her life had come full circle. The struggles she once feared had prepared her for something far greater than she could have ever imagined. She smiled at Liam, who laughed at her silly joke, and at Alexander, who nodded at her with quiet pride. Her life had changed forever. Not because she sought wealth or recognition, but because she had chosen to be kind. And that was a lesson she would carry with her always.